Hey everybody, it's James Veigli here, and welcome to another episode of the MBA podcast. Before we even go into what we're talking about today, I have the main man, the myth, the legend with me, Ash Playsted. How you doing?
Howdy ho, James. I'm doing really well. And look, we're starting the long climb up to another round number. We're at 161. And everybody, if you're listening to this, I'm waving. But if you happen to be watching this somewhere, you saw me wave. Looking forward to getting stuck into another juicy one, James.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were going for like the round number of 200, but 200 is still, that's almost a year away. It's still a long way before we crack the 200, but we'll get there in about 40 weeks' time. But yes, hey listeners, good to see you. Well, good to have you with us, I should say. Today, our topic is the quality and quantity of content marketing. Content marketing is probably one of these buzzwords that we hear a lot these days. Ash, I mean, last week we talked about systems and processes. That's a big buzzword. There are a lot of buzzwords out there, and I think content marketing is definitely one of them. And of course, with any typical buzzword, there's a lot of myths and misconceptions and just plain bad advice in the industry and out there in the ethos. So, ether, if that's even the right word to use. So what we want to do, listeners and Ash, I guess, is try and unpack those two concepts. Maybe we'll start with what the heck is content marketing? What do we even mean by that? But most importantly, why quality and quantity are incredibly important. Because if you just go down the path of content marketing for the sake of it, it's kind of pointless, isn't it, Ash? A bit like we talked about this last week, just having a website for the sake of having a website, pointless. Just having systems and process for the sake of it, not doing it very well, pointless. Just being on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn without having a strategy and a direction, kind of pointless and a waste of your time. And I think content marketing is the same. If you're not doing it strategically with quality and quantity and real understanding, you're kind of wasting your time. So do you want to start by talking a little bit about what content marketing is before we get into quality and quantity?
Yeah, my sort of definition or my view of content marketing is not dissimilar to how you might regard editorial in a newspaper versus advertising, right? So, I mean, content marketing is things that your desired audience will just enjoy consuming, right? It's valuable, it's relevant, it meets them where they're at, so that they enjoy consuming it for the sake of consuming it. Much like you might read a newspaper and read editorial because you enjoy what you're reading, as opposed to an ad that might be on the side of the page that, if the whole newspaper was just ads, are you going to buy a newspaper that's full of ads or a magazine that's full of ads? Well, you wouldn't. And just the same as you wouldn't tune into someone's social media stream if all you got was product and here's what I do and buy something from me type advertising, even though you might not think it's advertising. That's what people think, as opposed to engaging with people because you're interested in what they're talking about from a editorial perspective. That's the way I see it, James. I don't know whether you've got a different opinion, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because, I mean, we lump these two words together, content marketing. And I guess I'd like to get your opinion on it, because content was just that. It's content, as you said, it's the editorial. That's the pure information piece, right? But then if we think, well, hang on, what is marketing? Well, marketing is essentially the messaging you put out there to motivate people to do something. Like you actually want to attract them into your business. That's kind of the advertising sense. So content and marketing are kind of two different things. Like one is about educating and showing value. The other one is about attracting them to your business. So when we put them together, we're blending editorial and advertising. So we get advertorials, which are a combination of being helpful, but also motivating and incentivizing them to come and knock on your door. Do you think of content marketing as being like that, like advertorial, which is, it is incredibly valuable, it's relevant, it's educational, but it's designed in a way that strategically directs people into your world? Or are you of the opinion that content marketing is more towards essentially you're just using content as your marketing piece? Your prime MO is to go out into the market with content, so much so that when the audience is ready, they will proactively knock on your door. Where do you sit with that? Because I know there would be a variety of people's thoughts on that.
Well, I think they're both right, essentially. And so I think there's a place for both. Personally, my view is the second one is probably where I lean, which is adding value purely through the content. So you're not advertising anything, you're not directing people anywhere, you're simply providing information, stories, content that is interesting to your desired audience, rather than, you know, just anybody. And that's part of the marketing angle, I guess, is to understand who your ideal customers might be, right? That's where the marketing bit for me sits. So yes, advertorials as a summary is reasonably accurate, but it's almost, in my mind, it's separating out the analysis of who your desired audience are and where they might be, then designing and delivering content that's meant to be seen and valued by that audience. So in that sense, it is advertorial, but it is definitely the content for content's sake. Now, the other part of your question was, you know, is it people reaching out? And I think this is one of the things, particularly for platforms, you know, like LinkedIn, for example, where there's a real growing industry around outbound DMs, like actually providing great content. And then when people engage with your content, if they do, is nurturing and converting that interest into an offline discussion, DM being obviously a direct message. So strategically, I think content marketing just for its own sake is probably doesn't make sense unless you do it because you enjoy it. Like, you know, but, you know, content marketing, of course, can be, as I'm thinking, content marketing can be as simple as you talking about your, I don't know, your life on Facebook or Instagram. Like if it's of interest to the audience that you want to appeal to, that can be content marketing. Or content marketing can be stories about people that you've helped, stories about your own journey, stories that are relevant to people's, you know, for example, cost of living, or things that are going on in the world right now that you might have struggled with yourself and overcome, or that other people you've helped might have dealt with, or all sorts of parts of content marketing can fit in there where you're telling stories at an editorial level. And I think if you liken it to a newspaper, that's what you find with newspapers, is they do try to put editorial in that is reasonably consistent with who they believe their desired audience is and what they want to read. And that can go as far as political persuasions and all sorts of things, right? You know, when it comes to mainstream sort of media. But when it comes to individual mortgage brokers, I think it's really important to understand where content marketing fits in, what it is, and where it might fit into your big picture, which is where the whole strategic structure. And look, if I'm being honest, you know, there are some mortgage brokers that do it really well, but most are fairly early on in my view with understanding how to make this work.
Yeah. So it's a big concept, and the funny thing is that when we came up with the topic for this, it was just, we were thinking more about talking about the quality and quantity of it. But as we pressed record, it was like, hang on, content marketing itself is this unknown buzzword. I mean, it's a recent word to a concept that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. Like people have been using education and content as a way of educating and motivating their target market for centuries, like forever. Like this is not a new concept. I think marketers like to go out and try and sell the idea of content marketing like it's a new thing. But as you said, it's really the strategy of just giving and educating and helping without really expecting anything in return, because you're relying on that reciprocity and value equation. I'm sort of a little bit more old school, Ash, in that I like there to be an advertising element at the same time. Like, so for when I think of content marketing, I think, yes, 99% engaging, relevant, valuable to my target market content to help them. But as you sort of said, if you don't have another strategy to support that, well, how are you going to make some money? You're just going to rely on hope that that person will knock on your door. Or do you spend the 1% of that space, 99% content, 1% of that can be, hey, if you would like to have a chat with us about, saving money on your loan or doing what we just told you to do in this article easier and better, well, give us a buzz and let's have a chat about it. Because information is helpful, but the service to implement the information is even more valuable. So I like the idea of the content speaking for itself, but then opening or holding the door open to the watcher or the reader or the listener to say, hey, if this has been helpful for you, maybe you'd like to have a chat with us about whatever you'd like to do, type of thing. So that's content marketing.
Well, let's have a think about this. Like, I'm trying to, I guess, talk about this in a way that might make sense to our listeners, James. And I use an example. Like, I listen to a particular radio program, a morning show on a particular radio station here in Victoria every morning when I go for a walk at sort of 6 o'clock in the morning, right? And this show is designed for 40 to 60-year-olds, sort of baby boomers. And they have very engaging content through the two hosts. It's interesting, it's funny, but that's really designed to then sell space to advertisers, right? So media has worked like this forever. Provide what people really want and are interested in. Then once you've got their attention, you provide opportunities for product providers to promote their products. It's been around since Adam was a boy, right? Newspapers, TV, radio. Now, I know we've got subscription services who have a different model, but content marketing is really just the social media version of radio, TV, newspapers, who put a lot of time and effort into making really interesting content that people like consuming just for the sake of it. And then when people are enjoying it, you start to say, well, here's some products that might be relevant to you. And for example, in the radio show I listen to, they're always advertising bed mattresses for middle-aged people, services that are relevant to this type of audience. Like, they're not advertising services that will be relevant to 18-year-olds, right? Because they know their audience like the content. Therefore, product providers who've got products that are suitable to that audience pay a premium to be on the show. Now, I hope listeners take that analogy away and go, right, that, like you said, James, and I really agree with you, I do. Content needs to be interesting and engaging in its own right. But then, yes, of course, it's completely okay to be honest and authentic about saying, hey, if you've enjoyed this, here's a way that I might be able to help you. And here's how to get in contact with me, for sure. But you don't lead with that, right? You don't lead with, here's how I can help you. You lead with, here's content that I think you'd be interested in, right? Hence the word content marketing. So the content leads and the marketing gets weaved in.
Exactly. And I guess for our listeners, it gives them the opportunity to do both. Like, if you're advertising on a radio show, for example, well, the radio takes care of the content. You just try and insert the ad. Whereas content marketing is you get to come up with all the good stuff to educate. Plus, then you can say, here's how I can help you. It's kind of the best of both worlds. You're in control of both. So that's what we mean by content marketing. So when we sort of switch gears and talk about quality and quantity of that content marketing, now that we understand what it is, it's super important, I guess, for our listeners to understand that it's about both. Like, when it comes to quality, I think you mentioned these words before, it has to be engaging, it has to be relevant, it has to be valuable, it has to be entertaining, which is something a lot of people miss in their content, is that they're looking for something different, unique, special, or actually entertaining. That's where some of the best content shines, because it's unique, has a perspective that others don't, or it's purely entertaining. So you've got to come up with quality, and maybe we can talk about how to do that in a minute, Ash. And then quantity, which is, of course, well, that's the old consistency nugget. It's there's no point doing this if it's not consistent. That radio show that you listen to, Ash, every single day at the same time, every day. They do it consistently every day. So content marketing is the same. You've got to be playing the cadence of the platform. So if people expect if people are expecting an update every hour, you have to give them an update every hour. If they're expecting it once a day or once a week, that's the game you've got to play consistently, or else, especially in a lot of platforms and a lot of places these days, if you're not doing things consistently, doesn't matter how good you were yesterday or an hour ago or last week, you're now lost in the ether if you're not current. So let's talk a tiny bit about quality and quantity from how you see it.
Oh, consistency is such a huge part of it. And look, let's be completely transparent, James. Our listeners right now are tuning in to content marketing. A podcast is content marketing, right?
Yep.
This is James and Ash talking about stuff we love, right? And storytelling and topics that are relevant, hopefully, to you guys listening in, that you enjoy and you get value out of and ideas. But at the same time, there's marketing. If we can help you, here's how to reach out and speak to us. It is content marketing, and podcasting is a very good form of content marketing, just as is writing a newsletter, posting on social media. You've got to be sure of the quality. Now, quality, to me, I want to speak about quality for a minute. Now, I think a lot of people hear the word quality and they go, okay, it's got to be perfect. That's not what we're saying necessarily, right? Yes, you can have high standards, but I think one of the big blockers for people with content is, I'm not happy with the way I look on the video. I'm not happy with what I said. I'm not happy with something. It's got to be perfect. It's got to be this. It's got to look. Yes, over time you can improve some of those quality things, but I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, James, but I think you're referring, when you say quality, to part production values, but primarily is the subject matter that you're talking about. Like, what are you talking about? Are you just waffling on about, this car that you love driving, but your audience are interested in saving money on their mortgage? It's the quality. It might be a good quality as far as production values, but is it of the right quality for your ideal audience? Right. So I think that's the quality differentiator that I guess I interpret is, yes, you want good quality, and doing a podcast like we're doing now, there are quality standards you've got to maintain. But I think for a lot of people with social media particularly, it's not difficult to point the phone at yourself and start talking.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think maybe a lot of our listeners thought, hang on, that's really hard to come up with quality. But what I'm talking about is being authentic and real and helpful. It doesn't have to be polished and professional. It just has to be whatever is going to get people to stop scrolling and pay attention to you because it's different and helpful and real. That's what I mean by quality. So I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, so then you come back to, I guess, the consistency. And I mean, I think we see it a lot, right? And I understand running a mortgage broking business, or certainly trying to transition from being a broker to running a business. And there's almost a compulsion to be on social media. You've got to be. That's where all the eyeballs are, this, that, and the other. And you hear all these amazing stories about, I got, all these leads, or I've got all these followers. And so I think it creates a real bubble of pressure for our listeners to go, you know what, I better participate in that, otherwise I'll miss out. Now, I disagree with that, but certainly the part that I do agree with is, if you're going to do content marketing, you need to be consistent. And consistency means partly the style, but also the timing, right? So there's no point posting every day for 2 weeks and then not posting for 2 weeks, Like once you build up a cadence, you've got to maintain it. Right? And I think this is a big, big limiter or perhaps misunderstanding that if I mean, not wanting to offend anybody here, but just being honest, is I think a lot of mortgage brokers think consistency is just about getting some third-party service provider, you know, to automate a post with the latest interest rate updates into their social media feed. Is it consistent? Yes. Is it valuable and relevant and high quality in the sense that we're talking about? No, because people can get that information anywhere, right? So I just want to highlight the bit that you mentioned, James, and that is it's so important that it's built around the authentic you. Like this is the bit that I say with content marketing, and you can get your team involved in content marketing if you've got one too, but it's got to be built around you. You know, what makes you tick? Otherwise, the information like interest rate, right? Like anyone can do that. Like there's 1,000 brokers posting the latest RBA rate announcement. Whoopsie doosy, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the customer would have got that from 10 other locations on Twitter 5 minutes, you know, an hour before that anyway. Like, so yeah, I'm glad that we picked this up because quality and quantity really important. And I think, yeah, as you say, a lot of brokers mistake quality for professional and polished, and they'll go and sign up for a service that puts out polished professional content on a consistent basis. But polished and professional isn't authentic and real. Might be a little bit helpful, but it's kind of generic and boring. So you probably, depending on the, you know, how good it is, it's not really going to engage with those people. It's not going to get them inspired or connected with you. And while it's probably better than nothing, it's certainly not going to tick the box of content marketing. It might sort of tick the box of, you know, at least having a touch point with your clients on a regular basis so they've completely forgotten your brand. But if we really want to dive into this, we want to do something that's different. I mean, like this podcast, that's a perfect example, as you mentioned. We do this every week without fail. And, well, okay, do we have professional microphones and fancy video No, like I'm using my AirPods and the little pinhole camera in my laptop. But we do it in a way that is speaking from the experience and, you know, directly to you guys as our listeners. Like we hope this comes across as authentic and helpful and real. It might not be scripted and polished with fancy sound bites and intros and outros and, you know, things like that in it. But I think you guys would know the difference. And if you're a listener of this podcast, you're probably listening for a reason. So you guys have got to find a way in your business how to put some good stuff out there on a regular basis for people that are in your world, prospects, clients, partners. How do you become valuable to people in your world? That's kind of the challenge, Ash. Let's just forget the idea of content marketing and all the bloody buzz. How do we consistently be providing value to our communities in a real, authentic way that is, you know, easy and fun for us to do because it's part of our personality. We would do it anyway. Where, you know, and not one of these things that we think we have to do on the side of business. It becomes part of what we do. And just as a side note, before I hand the reins back to you, some of the most successful brokers we know almost lead with content marketing and being valuable as their almost thing they do every day consistently. And because they do that so well, they have a flood of business that they can't keep up with. So quite interesting, when you lead with this, you will have more than enough business every single day.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it's a good point to sort of wrap up, and that is, you know, the role of content marketing, I think, gets confused and misunderstood and misrepresented. Like, it plays a very valuable role in overall brand support. Like standalone, you know, like just as a standalone thing, which is what I think brokers might think it is, you know, it's not necessarily valuable unless it's part of a bigger positioning that you're doing other things to generate, I guess, a return on time and effort. Because, you know, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes a day, it still takes time. It still takes some structure. It still takes, you've got to record it, download it, post it. Those things still need to be done. So if you're going to invest time and effort, it's important to understand why you're doing it, who it is that you're speaking to, what is the ultimate result you're looking to achieve? Is it to build an audience? Is it to build a breadcrumb trail of content that supports reaching out to people to start conversations at a key partner level? Understand why you're doing it and who you want to be speaking to, because we know, I think one of the things that people do, James, is very common, is the sort of lurking and stalking that people do. That if you're engaging in business generation in some way, one of the first things that any potential customer or partner will do is they'll check you out on social media. They'll Google you, they'll see your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your this, your that, and they're going to have a quick look and go, who is this person? Right? And that's where the breadcrumbs that you're laying down in your content can become very important part of their decision-making process on whether to go ahead with business or not. So, that's something I think that every listener should take into account with their content marketing plans, if they have any. And if you don't have any, well, that's where you have a chat with people like us, to understand, does this fit into my strategy? And if so, where? And then how do I go about implementing it? They're the things that we focus on with our clients, obviously.
100%. And that's a good place to leave as well. Like with any of these episodes, listeners, there's 1,001 things you can do, maybe even quote unquote should do to grow your mortgage business, but knowing what to do at this moment for you to get to your goals. Well, the only way you're going to know that is if you unpack that with experts like us that can help you work out what is the order for you. So, it's a bit like with this podcast, Ash. We know that we put out great stuff every single week. Do we want our listeners to implement every single thing we do sequentially every week? No. Like, these should just be little tools in the tool belt or sound bites of inspiration in terms of what our listeners should be doing for their situation. Well, that has to be unpacked. Ring up and have a call with one of our growth coaches so we can work out where you are, where you want to be, and what you should do next. Because maybe content marketing is it. Maybe it's something you shouldn't even bother with for 3 to 6 or 12 months. So that's a very good point to leave this episode. We should probably mention that on every episode, Ash, in that, a bit like the disclaimer for, medical pills or doctors, like this is not advice. Do not necessarily do this unless you have been advised based on your situation. But anyway, listeners, I hope you've liked this episode on content marketing, and we're looking forward to seeing you again next week.
If symptoms continue, seek medical advice, right? Come and talk. Look, we love what we do. We hope you get some inspiration and some nuggets of gold. And obviously, we love working with you guys as well. So, let's wrap up, James. I'll see you next week.
Sounds good, listeners. See you next time. Stay cool. Bye for now.